Welcome to the Book Fair Podcast. My name is Anthony, and I am recording from Colorado. After living in Texas for my entire life, my wife and I have moved to someplace that is less hostile towards queer people. And this week we have the newest releases for young readers, as well as a frightening story from Hong Kong, proving that censorship isn't happening only in the United States. Coming this Friday, we will have an interview with Jerry Spinelli, author of 5th Grade Top Dogs. Let's start this week's episode by looking at new releases, starting with The Explorers by D. Hahn and illustrated by Ashlyn Anstee. Hahn and Anstee's heart-tugging intergenerational tale gently guides readers through the anxiety that comes with a new life stage, from building castles populated with earthworms to eating pickle and cheese sandwiches. Etta and her BFF, Grandma Maisie, who consider themselves explorers, have never met an adventure they didn't like. As light brown-skinned Etta begins kindergarten and pale-skinned Grandma moves into a senior living facility nearby, the single narrative shifts into a parallel peek at their solo adventures. When Etta's classmates aren't keen on earthworm castles, and Grandma Maisie's neighbor doesn't care for her pet frog, each of the duo feels lonely and left out. But a grandparents' picnic at the local park proves the perfect event to turn things around, reuniting Grandma Maisie and Etta, and helping them both form new bonds. Mixed media images with a perky energy capture dynamic details, including Grandma Maisie zooming on her scooter throughout this lively exploratory meditation on expanding horizons. This book is recommended for ages 3 to 7. Next is Pia in the Forest by David Bruggink. In Bruggink's debut graphic novel, a gentle early reader, young canine Pia and her father hike through a state park. Along the way, Dada introduces Pia to conservation, explaining it as recognizing in the natural world something special that's worth protecting. But Pia grows frustrated by Dada's leisurely pace and ventures off alone, equipped with his nature-fielding audio recorder and headphones. She meets bespectacled Quinn, a squirrel-like youth who introduces Pia to skipping stones and encourages her to experience the environment through play. The two quickly exchange perspectives and tools. Pia shares the recorder while Quinn offers his binoculars, and the two discover new ways of engaging with the landscape. Their imaginative collaboration soon expands into crafting elaborate fairy houses from found objects, including pine cones, sticks, and stones. As Pia whiles away the hours with Quinn, she realizes that Dada may be feeling lonely without her, launching the new friends on a reunification mission. Lush, detailed illustrations anchor the story in a vivid, natural world. Domestic characterizing moments, Pia's interrupting her father, asserting control over car trip music, impulsively snacking on sprinkles, all add humor. It's a playful look at wilderness wonders. Back matter includes a practical primer on using field recording equipment. This book is recommended for ages 5 to 8. Next is Fatal Glitch, Camp Zero by Erin Entrada Kelly and Eliot Schrefer, and illustrated by Jeannette Arroyo. Kelly and Schrefer craft a brisk, unnerving tale that blends technological horror with a cautionary fable. After accidentally injuring her younger sister, 11-year-old Sofia Mendoza, who reads as Latinx, is sent by her father to Forest Jaw, an isolated wilderness camp, hoping the experience will encourage her to reflect on what she did. There she encounters unsettling figures, including severe and enigmatic camp director Monarch, who's often accompanied by a mechanical vulture. Sophia's expectations of solemn self-improvement give way to something more sinister when Monarch reveals that Forest Jaw is backed by the wildly popular video game Sandbox. The campers are soon thrust into a high-stakes, elimination-style competition with the promise of 1 million in-game credits for the winner. Challenges inspired by Sandbox, shifting ranks, and the ever-present threat of removal by robotic vultures creates a cutthroat environment. Sophia embraces the rules with chilling resolve, determined to win at any cost. Her willingness to lie, manipulate, and betray sets her apart as a deliberately unlikable protagonist, and the novel's central tension lies in just how far she will go. Stark black and white illustrations from Arroyo heighten the suspenseful atmosphere. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next is Spindlewood by Freddie Kölsch and illustrated by Bendt. A non-magical girl must fake her way through a magic education while uncovering her family's complicated past in this charming middle-grade debut from Kölsch. Though 12-year-old Lilac Black doesn't believe in the supernatural, she leaps into action when a notable seance her uncle is hosting goes awry, pretending to channel a spirit in his stead. Afterward, she learns that ghosts are real. Her family members are seers, and now that Lilac has appeared to come into her own power, she's ready to attend the Spindlewood School of Seeing. Lilac avoids admitting that she can't perceive ghosts, fearful that the international delegation of seers would erase her memory if they knew. Instead, as she acclimates to her new school, she fakes results through misdirection, research, and quick wits. Upon befriending fellow 8th graders, Lilac realizes that Spindlewood is teeming with more mysteries than she anticipated, and that her late mother, a Spindlewood graduate, may have been involved in a school tragedy years ago. Now Lilac must uncover what happened, without letting her own secret slip. This delightfully unsettling tale offers captivating mystery helmed by a stubborn and fiercely practical protagonist. Snarky, omniscient narration propels a wry, enjoyable entry in the magical school canon. Characters are portrayed with various skin tones, and this book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. The final title this week is Salvage by Renée Nault. After rising sea levels flood coastal cities, the wealth gap between displaced climate refugees and those living inland widens, a dichotomy that Nault captures with searing clarity in this stunning tale. Years later, Paulo, a descendant of refugees, helps his family make ends meet by diving into the nearby underwater city and scouring the abandoned skyscrapers for items to sell. While scavenging, Paulo finds a suitcase full of perfectly preserved vintage designer clothes. Donning one of his finds, Paulo travels to the Uplands, an opulent neighborhood housing Ocean City elite. There he befriends a group of affluent teens and develops feelings for Jules, a shy sculptor and daughter of a famous but disengaged actor. Lying about his background, Paulo tags along to the group's nightly escapades at lavish clubs and art galleries. Inventive depictions of these extravagant outings feature Mermaid Lagoon-themed pools, roller coasters speeding into giant live anglerfish, and psychedelic 1970s-inspired tea parties, drawing readers into the teens' world while emphasizing the differences in their experiences. Organic dialogue models healthy communication as the characters confront socio-economic disparity and the long-standing impact of the climate crisis. The result is a discerning coming-of-age graphic novel that teems with surreal beauty and tender, honest heart. This book is recommended for ages 14 and up. That covers the new releases for this week. Next, we'll be taking a look at some news. But first, if you appreciate the work being done on the Book Fair podcast, there are a number of ways to show your support. First, you can like, comment, or follow wherever you are currently listening to help push the show out to new listeners. Second, you can follow the podcast on Blue Sky, Instagram, and TikTok at BookFairPod. You can also go to patreon.com/thebookfair to find episodes posted early as well as links to news sources used throughout the show. Following on Patreon is free and there are no posts hidden behind a paywall. Of course, the best way to help the Book Fair podcast is simply to share it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Now, on with the show. Next, let's take a look at news. Starting in Tennessee, where there is debate unfolding over a book banning law. Previously on the Book Fair podcast, we looked at Tennessee, where Knox County schools removed Roots from library shelves before reversing the controversial decision. This ongoing story has led to debate over the intent of Tennessee's Age-Appropriate Materials Act, which initially led to Roots being removed from school libraries. Tennessee lawmakers behind the state's Age-Appropriate Act say that local school boards are responsible for determining whether books are appropriate for students. Tennessee Senator Joey Hensley, a sponsor of the law, said, quote, "We didn't define exactly what that meant, and it is different in each district, but we leave it up to the school boards who are elected individuals, and they deal with the parents." End quote. While it sounds like the intent of the Age-Appropriate Materials Act is to kick the can down to local elected officials, Representative Hensley seems to disagree with the decision to remove Roots from Knox County schools. Quote, "Now, the issue with Roots in Knoxville, that's taking it a little bit far, but each school district had to set their own policies." End quote. The frustration with situations such as KCS in Tennessee is that school boards are making decisions that are done in an attempt to comply with state laws. Now that there seems to be uncertainty whether Roots is deemed inappropriate for some grades, the lawmakers behind the bill at the state level are completely washing their hands of the situation and saying that the school board's decision, whatever it may be, is the correct one. Unfortunately, there are some states where failure to comply with these laws come with legal and criminal consequences for school staff. Some legislation does not offer agency for school districts to curate content, such as in Texas, where the current school library material criteria led to the New Braunfels Independent School District completely closing student access to their libraries at the beginning of the school year. Next, school librarians in Ohio are raising alarms about book bans and funding cuts. Proposed legislation in Ohio would threaten student access to library materials, which has resulted in members of the community to speak out. Gail Schmuel, president of the Ohio Educational Library Media Association, said, quote, "Right now, a lot of administrators and school boards look at having a school librarian as a luxury. I think a lot of librarians are just hoping to stay employed." End quote. Cuts to state public education have been talked about for decades, especially after multiple Ohio Supreme Court decisions ruled that the state is not paying what it is obligated by the state's constitution. In 2022, a model called the Fair School Funding Plan passed with bipartisan support. The plan was to fund schools based on needs from district to district. However, the model was abandoned in the last operating budget. While the most recent state operating budget included a $226 million increase in school funding, the Fair School Funding Plan model calls for at least triple that amount to maintain its initial calculations, as well as combating inflation since the plan was first introduced. Instead of continuing the Fair School Funding Plan, Ohio lawmakers instead opted to raise its private school voucher program to over $1 billion. This means that if Ohio had allocated only half of what they put toward private school vouchers, they would be able to meet the funding goal for public education. Sharon Hawks, a retired librarian, conducted a survey of school librarians with the help of the Ohio Educational Library Media Association. Of participants, 56% experienced censorship incidents between 2021 and 2025. As schools face funding challenges, it is positions like librarians that get reduced, not only in Ohio, but other states, not just those where lawmakers are hostile towards the freedom to read. On a previous episode, we covered how New York City, which legally requires public schools of a certain size to have a full-time librarian, and only 15% of schools in the city are meeting that requirement. The final story this week comes from Hong Kong, where booksellers have been arrested for selling material that is considered a threat to national security. Here on the Book Fair podcast, I try my best to highlight stories that threaten the freedom to read. And while I mostly follow public schools and libraries, there are other instances beyond the United States where censorship reaches Orwellian levels. This is one of those stories that serves as a warning for the trajectory the United States is currently on. Hong Kong's top secretary official said Thursday that booksellers should ensure the titles they sell do not harm national security. This comes after 5 people linked to 2 bookstores were arrested. The police operation was the third round of arrests targeting independent bookstores within 4 months. Secretary for Security Chris Tang told reporters, quote, "If you are a bookseller, you have the responsibility to make sure the books you sell won't endanger national security. It's equal to, for example, when you are selling food, you need to ensure the food won't cause a stomachache and is not either poison or illegal." End quote. On July 15th, police raided Have a Nice Stay, a bookshop founded by a group of former journalists, and Greenfield Bookstore. Police said the 5 people arrested were suspected of displaying seditious materials and selling seditious publications. A police statement alleged that the content stirred up hatred against the city's government, judiciary, and law enforcement agencies. After the raid, Have a Nice Stay has announced it will be shutting down on August 30th. In March, police also arrested the owner and staff of the bookshop Book Punch on suspicion of selling seditious publications, including the biography of pro-democracy media tycoon Jimmy Lai, who was sentenced to 20 years in prison in his national security case. In June, Hong Kong police arrested 2 booksellers on suspicion of receiving funds from foreign political organizations. The other incidents do not list titles as part of their arrests. However, the general idea of books being illegal for being critical of or conveying negative opinions of the government is incredibly dangerous. Typically, I like to finish these episodes with a good news story, and for this week I thought it was appropriate to share something more personal. I was born in Texas and lived there my entire life. Ever since I was a child, I absolutely hated the weather. It was hot and it was humid. Even when there were droughts, the high humidity made it completely unbearable. However, my recent move to Colorado comes from a desire for security. I am non-binary, publicly listing they-them pronouns, and my wife is a trans woman. With the results of the 2024 election and the conservative legislators in Texas, we no longer felt safe or even welcome in our home state. And now, after a year and a half, we have fled the state for somewhere that we can feel comfortable being openly and authentically ourselves. Being so far from family does sting a bit, but being somewhere that is accepting and welcoming is worth it. We look forward to building our life together here in Colorado. And if you're listening to this, Maddie, I love you. I am so happy to be here with you and the professor. This will conclude another episode of the Book Fair podcast. Coming this Friday, we will have an interview with Jerry Spinelli, author of 5th grade Top Dogs. If you'd like to stay up to date with the show, you can follow wherever you are currently listening, or on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Book Fair Pod. If you'd like to help the Book Fair podcast grow, you can also go to patreon.com/thebookfair. Following on Patreon is free, and there are no posts hidden behind a paywall. You can find links to news sources, as well as episodes posted early. Simply add the RSS feed to your preferred podcast platform. Of course, the best way to help the Book Fair podcast is simply to share it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Thank you so very much for listening, and as always, I'll talk to you next time.